Cults is King podcast. I'm your host, the Duke, with my co-host, Rambling Bones.
Hello again.
And today, we are covering Mad Monster Party.
That we are.
Sometimes written as Mad Monster Party?
With a question mark. Yeah.
Yeah, on the film posters and on the movie case itself, I never see the question mark. But when I look this up, it's written down as Mad Monster Party.
Maybe the people who did that weren't sure what they watched.
I kind of that was kind of my takeaway from what you were telling me is you weren't quite sure how to feel about that.
Yeah. If you want an initial reaction, my initial reaction is could be an hour shorter.
Well, I for one liked it. I think a little more than Bones did. So I'm gonna go ahead and just roll on and give you the synopsis here. Well, real quick, as you're picturing this is a Rankin-Bass film. So if you don't know what that means, you've probably seen a Rankin-Bass special made before. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, The Little Drummer Boy. A lot of those seasonal stop-motion puppet specials that you've seen before were made by Rankin-Bass, and this one is no exception. This one, of course, has more of a Halloween theme, and it opens up with Dr. Frankenstein, who is voiced by Boris Karloff. And he has just made his crowning achievement, a elixir that can destroy matter. And to celebrate this, he's hosting a party, a monster party. He has monsters all over the globe because he is the leader of the worldwide monster organization coming to his castle. And in addition to that, he is also inviting his nephew, a normal human pharmacist named Felix Franken.
He's not even he says he's a pharmacist, but he is the soda jerk at the pharmacy.
Yeah, mostly he causes trouble by sneezing and breaking stuff at his job. But anyway, because, see, Dr. Frankenstein wants to retire while he's on top. So he plans on passing his role down to Felix. Unfortunately, he has another assistant, Francesca, and she and some of the other monsters plan on getting Felix out of the way so that one of them can take control. Hijinks ensue.
Hijinks ensue.
Would you say that's a good synopsis?
Yeah, that's pretty much what happens.
And I mean, a lot of this is not a very plot-centric special here.
No.
A lot of it is just various hijinks with the monsters, and at some points just them hanging out at the castle and coming into conflict with each other. And then other instances there are when they're trying to kill Felix. But and there's a whole cast of monsters here. You have the Gill Man, you have the Invisible Man, you have the Frankenstein's monster called Fang in this. The Bride of Frankenstein, also known as the monster's mate in this movie, who is voiced by Phyllis Diller.
Yeah.
And believe me, you hear that. If you know Phyllis Diller, you know that signature Phyllis Diller laugh. In this movie, they did feel the need to do the laugh after every line of dialogue that she speaks.
If you drink every time Phyllis Diller laughs,
you can't.
You can't.
You won't make it through. You won't make it through the first 30 minutes. We also see the Mummy, Dracula, the Hunchback. They're all there.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, except I was most taken aback by him because when he is in Dr. Jekyll form, he looks like the Chad meme. He has a massive chin and blonde hair, but whenever he talks, it looks like they forgot to animate his mouth most of the time because he only talks out of the corner of his mouth, which is typically not visible because of his massive chin.
Can't help that he's a Chad. So, what were your initial thoughts on this movie?
Well, apart from the reason I say it needs to be an hour shorter is because it is an hour and a half, and while the TV Christmas specials are all very tightly plotted, it felt like they had to drag it out and didn't know what to fill the time with. And it's not just like scenes that aren't important, it's scenes that aren't important that also meander. One scene, there's a character named Yetch, who is a Peter Lorre zombie type guy, and he's being shown like the kitchen and what's going to be served at the Mad Monster Party. And there's parts of their scene that are fine, but it's just like it's so slow.
Well, and though I'm not sure this would have alleviated all of your concerns, part of that is most of these TV networks would order these
Mm-hmm.
from Rankin-Bass after this was only a few years off of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which really launched them into the stratosphere. After that, everybody wanted one. Now, I'm not exactly sure what this one was made for, but I know that whoever wanted it to be longer.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a couple scenes that were added after most of it was already filmed for length, and that scene you're talking about right now was one of those scenes.
Yeah, and those might be the scenes that meander the most. I'm not privy to what all scenes were added, but it does feel like a lot of scenes meander. I'll also say there's music in this movie, but none of the songs are earworms like every song in Rudolph and Santa Claus are earworms. You get those stuck in your head. I like the opening song.
Oh, and that was actually done by a woman named Ethel Ennis, who is, I believe, also known as being the first lady of jazz. So
That
she had
is,
an established separate career.
yeah, that's I looked her up. That's what they called her in Baltimore, where she pretty much stayed at. She was quite successful, and she even performed a strange version of the national anthem at Richard Nixon's reinauguration.
Well, I'm gonna have to look that up. What was strange about it?
I mean, she's a jazz singer, so I'm gonna
It
guess
was very
she
jazzy.
probably did what annoys everybody now when somebody does a version of the national anthem and doesn't sing it just how it's
But
written.
every note has to last 20 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know.
Well, she sounded good on this one, and one thing I thought was interesting is I actually had a Blu-ray copy of this movie. I didn't just have it laying down. I did order it for the express purpose of this podcast, but it had a lot of great special features on it. And the composer for this, Mari Laws, said that part of, though they weren't like trying to do it beat for beat, part of the inspiration was for some of the music, not necessarily the musical numbers, but the opening and the music that accompanied the scenes was Goldfinger, kind of like the big important sound.
That's the thing about a lot of the music. Apart from maybe the opening song, all of the songs don't feel like they were written expressly for a mad monster party so much as they were just written for the 60s.
And I'd have to agree with that, even as somebody who really likes this one. A lot of the songs are kind of generic. What I did like though is outside of like the musical numbers though, just the music itself, the actual like score, I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, as much as this movie's a kind of Halloween monster themed movie, that's almost really secondary to it being a 60s movie.
Yeah.
This is one of the most 60s things I've ever seen.
And I mean, even Santa Claus is Coming to Town has at least one song that is really psychedelic.
That's my favorite one though.
It's probably the best written song, but this movie, I don't know, the music just doesn't really do it for me. And as funny as it is, the Mad Monster Party song would do well to not have weird noises inserted every 5 seconds in there. It's like the 60s Batman show where it's like the bang and the pow, fly onto screen.
Except they felt the need to say it out loud in the song.
Yeah, the song's going and then you'll just hear eek or yeah. And it just pops on screen, smaller, not the word, it doesn't take up the whole screen. But it's a case of, I don't know if it really helps the listen ability of this song.
I'm sure you can find a version without it, but you're right. Did you not enjoy "It's the Mummy"?
Oh my goodness, the worst song in the they've all sat down for dinner, I guess. And for entertainment, they have what I could only describe as the Ramones, but if they were skeletons in the 60s. They all have that long hair with like the bang cut.
And they have about the same songwriting ability as the Ramones.
It's literally just, it's the mummy, it's the mummy, just on loop.
And there's a very long dancing scene featuring the Mummy and Phyllis Diller's character.
And it just goes on and on. and on.
Well, the thing is this is not a very long movie. It is an hour and a half, though. That is long by Rankin-Bass standards. Like I said, most of their stuff kind of falls into the nice, like, hour shorts.
It feels pretty long when this again, this is a story that could have been easily told very quickly. If there was more to the story, then I could understand the hour and 30 minutes, but it really, it feels longer, at least to me.
Well, and maybe if they had I mean, this one obviously has a cult following. That's part of the reason it's on here. But I wonder if it would be maybe more remembered, like Rudolph is and other Rankin-Bass productions, if they had cut some of the fat, because there is a lot of really good stuff in here.
Yeah.
It's just that there's also a lot of fat. There's some really ambitious set work here.
Yeah.
Particularly the end where they have the planes attacking the King Kong-esque character and all the other monsters. There's also a lot of scenes that must have been just a heck to film, where, I mean, you have like 16 characters on the same screen. And of course, they have to keep track of the exact movements of all of them to do. I mean, this is a stop motion picture, so I can't imagine the kind of time it took.
There's also times that I was interested in where they use non-stop motion effects, like at the beginning where Dr. Frankenstein is making his matter-destroying elixir. Sparks are coming down, and it's not animated glitter, it's actual sparks are shooting out down and like hitting the little puppet and the little dude.
The little dude.
I don't know what they call their stop motion figurines that they use.
I think I was watching the thing, and they had some people who worked on the movie in there, and I mean, they just referred to them as the puppets.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But and then there's like another part where I think it's right when we're introduced to Felix. He's about to take a drink of something, and it's like an actual liquid in the thing. So stuff like that I thought was very interesting. The movie looks great.
Especially parts that would have been hard, because, like, for instance, one of the most prominent monsters is the Invisible Man. So, of course, they have to use the thin wire and the aerial rig to make everything that's him float in place. And you can't see the wires at all when you're just watching it. All his scenes look great.
Yeah, it was kind of strange because you couldn't see the wires with him. However, there was a part where there were bubbles, and if you looked at the bubbles, like the little top of the bubble would have a little like just a little protrusion.
Yeah.
Where the thing was hanging.
I had
from.
missed that.
Again, there were live bubbles also in part of it. So little things like that. But for the most part, it looks great, and all of the stop motion is good. I will say, going back to the slowness, sometimes it feels like the characters themselves are meandering or moving a little slow, but that's not all the time. Now, since we're talking about how it looks, Duke, I told you that there were 2 connections to other movies that we had previously done. So the first one is that this movie was shot in Eastman color.
That's were they the ones who did House of Wax?
Yes. So that is our first connection. You should go watch that episode after this episode.
All right, so what's our second one?
We haven't gotten to there yet. It's
okay,
still
we're
surprise.
saving that. So you have to keep listening or you'll miss out on the little treat, little surprise. So one thing I really liked about this movie was the monster designs.
Yes. All of the monster characters are very distinct.
Right. They look like they belong in the same movie, but none of them are interchangeable. All of them have a lot of character to them. You have, like, as much as he's just a few floating things, one of my favorite ones is actually the Invisible Man, his fez and his sunglasses and
He's like
the robe.
purple robe, yeah.
Well, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm told so. We mentioned Phyllis Diller and Boris Karloff already. There are only 2 other voice actors. There was Gail Garnett, who does Francesca, but everybody else was done by Alan Swift. Alan Swift does every other voice that is not the Dr. Francesca or Phyllis Diller's monster.
Mm-hmm.
and he worked for years on the Howdy Doody show.
He was also on the Underdog show and was in Tom and Jerry, and he's our second connection
Oh boy.
because he was on a little show called Crime Story. Now, Duke, can you tell me what the name of the main actor on Crime Story was?
I hate it when you quiz me because I always get it wrong.
The
I'm going to guess it's something we've covered already.
Yeah, so Dennis Farina, who is in Manhunter, which we did an episode on. Go watch that after this episode.
Should they watch House of Wax or Manhunter first?
They should probably watch. Yeah, but House of Wax goes better with the season right
Oh,
now.
okay.
But no,
yeah.
I after seeing all of his cartoon work and voice acting,
Yes, he
and
even
then
did a
just-
voice in Courage the Cowardly Dog.
and then just seeing an episode of Crime Story. Why?
I said a good voice, but he had a good several voices because if you had told me that they had all been voiced by the same guy, I wouldn't have picked it up on that. But one of his strategies was he would assign each one an actor and then do an impression. So I don't remember exactly who it is because I haven't seen it yet, but you've seen the Maltese Falcon, haven't you?
Yeah, I own the Maltese
Okay, well,
Falcon.
the Invisible Man is based out on a character who's in the Maltese Falcon.
Oh, see, that makes so much more sense now. I get it.
Yeah.
And I guess that might also be why Peter Lorre is one of the voice types.
Yes, he picked Peter Lorre for Yetch, and he picked Jimmy Stewart for Felix Franken. And then he also picked, I can't remember who he picked for Dracula. The only thing I remember is that nobody on the set at the time knew the actor he had mentioned that he would do as Dracula
You know,
either, so I don't feel bad for not remembering.
So I'll give it to him in that I wouldn't have really, I didn't know that he did the voices for everyone, and everybody does sound distinct. However, I will say it is sort of a weird choice for like just randomly Jimmy Stewart impersonation. And I mean, I get the Peter Lorre goes with the theme, but it's like, why is the main character Jimmy Stewart?
You know what, though? It kind of, for a character design that could have ended up being a little generic, I think it makes him memorable. But yeah, no, he's like, I'm going to do Jimmy Stewart for him and Peter Lorre for him. And then I just watched the Maltese Falcon, and this is going to be great.
Yeah. However, the only thing I could think of whenever Felix talks was just, I wish I had $1 million.
Hot dog. Well, and I thought Frankenstein looked good.
Uh-huh.
He has just, we were talking about literally me characters before. The way that his eyes move and that he just seems just kind of out of it or like getting sucked into one thing to the next. I was like, wow, I kind of feel you, Frank.
Yeah.
It must be rough too being married to Phyllis Diller, who her monster looks pretty much like her but green.
like if she was a green withered witch
Right.
monster lady.
Yeah, had the outrageous hair and the nose and
So I guess since we said actors' names, we should probably mention Gail Garnett, who is Francesca. She's done a lot of television. The only thing that really popped out to me of note was a movie called The Children, and is I don't know if it's a cult classic, but it's certainly cult. And apart from her, you have Phyllis Diller, who is the queen in A Bug's Life. She had her own show.
yeah, she was a very big comedian at the time. People like Ellen and stuff would later go on after her, would be inspired by Phyllis.
She's also, I believe, Jimmy Neutron's grandma.
She is.
So do with that information what you will. And then, Duke, would you like to tell us about the biggest star, the reason to watch this?
Well, I think there's a few reasons, but the big star was Boris Karloff. In fact, this is one of the last things that he would do that would be even tangentially related to Frankenstein. But he played the Frankenstein's monster and the Mummy in the original Universal films. There's what really like just launched him into stardom. Which was good for him because I've never heard a bad thing about him, but he had very rough beginnings. He was the son to immigrants. I mean, I want to say he had tons of like brothers and sisters, but he was also like the sweetest guy. He would actually dress up on his block as Santa Claus and pass presents out every Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you aren't a big horror movie fan, which once again this is a weird place for you, he also did the voice on The Grinch, the classic version. He is the narrator.
Yeah. And it's sort of interesting. He wasn't an old man when he was in Frankenstein, but it was definitely, later in his career. So most of his acting came towards the second half of his life rather than, being a young fresh star who had all these roles.
Well, and unlike Bela Lugosi, who always resented being typecast, Boris leaned into it. When he became the monster guy, he was more than happy to be the monster guy. And I mean, he was even doing that late in his career. Any movie could kind of, any, horror movie, even if it was a little on the cheap side, could really bolster its appeal by getting Boris on it. And Boris was more than happy to do that.
Yeah, he reminds me of Vincent Price, sort of how Vincent Price was somebody who definitely leaned in and seemed to really enjoy the genre he worked in, but also that Boris was somebody who had interest in things beyond just filmmaking. He was a big time gardener. In fact, when they were making Frankenstein, it was like a super hot summer, and he was worried about his plants not getting enough water, so he would like drive home dressed as the monster, water his plants, and then drive back to set. But he was just a very multi-talented, multi-interested guy.
And part of the thing is too is though I'm not sure this movie was especially high budget. What kind of made it bigger budget and was supposed to widen its appeal was the addition of Boris Karloff and Phyllis Diller, which I think it to some extent succeeded. Certainly, I think that Boris Karloff being in it has been part of the reason that it's endured.
Yeah.
And though he sounds pretty much like Boris Karloff, he does do a pretty good job.
I wonder if that's the reason there is only 4 voice actors, is what they would have paid all the other voice actors went to just Boris Karloff and Phyllis Diller.
Well, and to be honest, though, you can get away with that when you have a guy like Alan Swift who can be
Everybody.
I mean, Lord, that was like how a lot of the early Looney Tunes were done. Is you'd have a couple voice actors who would just be everybody.
Yeah.
So he had some voice talent there. One thing that I learned researching this that I didn't know. So obviously this was made with stop motion. They called the process animagic. But did you know that a lot of this was actually done in Japan?
No, I wouldn't have even guessed that.
In fact, Arthur Rankin Jr., spent a lot of time living in Japan for, short stints during when movies would be made so he could help oversee the process.
Hmm.
Rankin-Bass, I think, was one of the first companies to do that, but a lot of their stuff was done in Japan. And I mean, they had this kind of like little ecosystem there, where we could make the puppets and we could film the puppets, and we had people who could tailor and order small little clothes to fit on the puppets just like you would for real actors and stuff. So that was interesting. One thing that's cool about Rankin and Bass was both of them were very hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't just like producers who just assigned the work to everybody else. Arthur obviously oversaw a lot of the animation, and Jules Bass, he actually would help compose all of the music. Basically, he would start out with something that he liked or kind of a direction, and then Mari would add to it, and they would both kind of add to it and add notes until they got something they were both happy with.
Yeah.
So I thought that was neat.
And they didn't just work on stop motion films.
No, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say Frosty the Snowman is also Rankin-Bass. I'd have to double check that. But
that sounds right.
They did have some traditionally animated features as well, though they weren't quite as notable as... When you think Rankin-Bass, they're most closely associated with these holiday special stop-motion pictures.
Yeah, but they did do The Hobbit.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Probably the most iconic version of The Hobbit. Were there more animated versions of The Hobbit, or was it just Lord of the Rings that Ralph Bakshi worked on?
I think Ralph just worked on Lord of the Rings. I can't think of any big name, or heck, any other versions of The Hobbit. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some.
But honestly, after reading The Hobbit, for me, in my head, it clicks that Rankin-Bass would make a Hobbit. It,
Right.
it feels like their style would really suit it.
I liked it better than the Peter Jackson take on The Hobbit. We'll always have the Lord of the Rings, but that's off topic. Oh, one other person who was involved with this is, do you know where the Mad in Mad Monster Party comes from?
Well, I would just assume that was something they just inserted because it's a zany film. Zany
Well,
stuff is going on. It's mad.
well, that's true, but not just because it's bonkers. You know who helped write the script?
Is it somebody with the word mad in their name?
Harvey Kurtzman, creator of Mad Magazine and frequent writer in EC Comics.
Now, did they explicitly say that's why the word mad is in there?
No,
Or
but
is
I'm
this-
drawing.
You're
drawing
making a
connections.
connection. Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think might have been. I don't know this for sure. I think there might have been one or other two people who were associated with Mad Magazine who were associated with this.
That's really kind of strange to me. I'm not an expert on Mad Magazine, but I always got the vibe it was sort of more biting satire.
Uh, I don't know. That's not been my impression of Mad.
Maybe
think it's
not
more been,
like mean-spirited, but more...
They do lean into satire a lot, but I think it's always been kind of like goofy, over-the-top, silly fare. And
Yeah.
I think that really kind of fits
Mm-hmm.
what they were going for in this movie.
Well, there's definitely some exceptionally silly parts. Two things that stand out to me are, at the beginning, Boris von Frankenstein. I don't think we said that his first name was Boris
Yes,
as well.
he's Boris von Frankenstein.
But to test his antimatter elixir, he dips a needle in it and pricks a crow, and then it flies away and explodes.
Like a mushroom cloud.
Yeah, there's a mushroom cloud.
And then he turns to the camera and goes, "Quoth the raven, nevermore."
That was so unexpected.
It was awesome.
It blew me away. And then the ending to the movie, where I guess two parts to the ending, where the King Kong, but it's not called King Kong. They just refer to him as it the entire movie. They didn't invite the giant monkey because
he's a boar.
he's a boar, and last time he ruined the party.
He also killed all the boars.
He also killed all the boars. But the giant monkey has arrived. He's got all of the monsters in his hand. He's destroyed the castle. He's causing havoc.
Yes, Felix and Francesca, who are no longer fighting but are in love.
Yes, they are in love now.
Are sailing away, and Boris is in one of his like planes that he has.
And flies it into it. It grabs him, and then Boris proceeds to blow him up with the elixir along with all of the monsters in himself.
Well, he was sick of the giant monkey, and all of the monsters let him down by trying to kill his nephew. So you know what? They had it coming.
I didn't know. I just... That's not how, at the start of the movie, I would have thought the end of the movie would be. I was kind of thinking maybe it would be a much more happier ending than a dumb ending, because
It's not a dumb ending.
it's a dumb ending
awesome.
because it's not the ending though. Boris blows them up. Francesca and Felix are on the boat, and Francesca reveals, "Oh, we can't get married because it turns out she's actually like a robot." And then it turns out that Felix is also probably a creation
Of the doctor.
and it's dumb.
It's
It was
a mad
dumb.
monster party.
You can only hide behind the word mad so much.
Okay, but what if you put a question mark at the end?
There you go. That you've protected it now.
Bones destroyed.
The funniest part of the movie, though, was completely unintentional. During one of the scenes, I believe that Felix doesn't want to become in charge of the monster organization, whatever. And Boris is trying to get him to do it, so a song, of course, happens. The song A doesn't really get across the point of you should be the leader of a monster
Sure
organization.
is. You gotta stay one step ahead.
Yeah, that's the song. You gotta stay one step ahead. And why it's happening, all of these little, like, goblin monster things are, like, pop out of nowhere. This is the only time you see them. And them, like, hopping towards the screen combined with this song that has, like, nothing to do with what's going on was really funny to me.
I know. For the record, though, if there is one song that is kind of an earworm, this one might be it. But no, I actually watched this with Bones in the same room, unfortunately. And he was about double over laughing just the whole song. And I said, "Are you okay over there, Bones?" And he's like, "The goblin's got a little bat costume on."
Yeah, one of them, like, not all of them are goblins, but one of them's like a little goblin, but he's got like a bat costume on, and it was very silly. It was a very silly scene, and it tickled my silly bones, okay?
Yeah.
Probably the best part of the whole movie, unintentionally, I think.
Well, like I said, I think we both came around very different. I think we both are in agreement that the movie is too long.
Yes.
Just for what, and that's probably becoming a meme. We say that about a lot of stuff, but I think a lot of movies could benefit from being tighter. This one probably could be, but I don't know. I have a little bit of nostalgia for this movie. As I mentioned on the last episode, I watched this all the time as a kid to the point where it was on a VHS at our library. It was one of the last VHSs. And I wore it out, which is probably why none of my siblings afterwards have seen it, because I think I wore out the VHS when I was 5 from watching it too much. So my mom hated this movie. I don't know if it was because she just had to see it so much or what, but this is a movie that really is near and dear to my heart. And picking it up after all these years, I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah, it was too long, but there was plenty of silliness to see. And as somebody who grew up as a monster kid, you know, uh, the way some people grew up with Cinderella, I grew up with Frankenstein, and The Wolf Man. Those are the earliest movies I remember watching. So this was like a godsend to little me.
Despite all my critiques, I do like it. I will say I do like it. I think for people who grew up with it probably like it a lot more than people who didn't grow up with it, like
Well,
me.
and I'll go further up in saying that I think part of it is not whether, because obviously when I was little it was already a very old movie, but I think a lot of it is this is definitely one that's more for children.
Yeah. But if you like monsters, especially the Universal monsters, this is aesthetically up your alley.
And the sets are really well done.
Yeah.
And very beautiful.
I would recommend this to some people, but not all people.
I would recommend this for people with kids or people who are young at heart.
Yeah, I think my biggest critique out of everything is it could have just been more Halloween-y or leaned heavier into the theming. The songs needed to definitely be more spooky related rather than you gotta keep one step ahead. Or well, I mean,
it's a banger.
The one song that it's the Mummy. I mean, I guess that's sort of themed, but it's awful. It's just terrible.
I don't know, if you like the Ramones, you might like that one.
But yeah, it could step heavier into the theming.
Right. No, it's definitely an oddity. Yeah, if you find the opportunity to watch this one, I would at least give it a shot. If you don't have kind of a childish sense of humor, or you don't have nostalgic for, these old monster movies, then it may not do a whole lot for you. But, your kids might like this one. I sure did.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, before we move on to the next movie, here's my next question for you. You got a favorite monster?
So,
in the movie, of course.
Yeah, that's a problem because like outside, I'm already influenced like a bias because of my personal preferences to certain Universal monsters. So my favorite Universal monster is the Invisible Man. So I'm just naturally inclined to gravitate towards the Invisible Man. I did like the Wolfman. I thought it was interesting that they made him look like he's dressed like a dirty hippie. Like he's got an
Yeah.
earring in, and
He's just like a big happy dog.
yeah, but
He if anybody, he probably didn't deserve to be blown up.
I don't know. It's probably between Invisible Man or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was going to be my other one too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like the design for both of them.
I mean, it was
I
a
like
case
how,
of I did like everybody though.
Yeah, no, all the monsters were likable or fun in their own way. In fact, I have to double check this, but one thing I heard that I believe their version of Dracula predated Count Von Count from
Oh,
Sesame Street, and I
interesting.
think it was a direct inspiration. I mean, it certainly makes sense. This version of the Count has the monocle and the long, sharp nose.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that for sure.
Yeah, I mean I could believe that. Or I mean with just, with Bela Lugosi, I feel like a caricature of him is probably all going to turn out sort of samey, but
I don't know. The
it
monocle
is
an
it is
invention,
pretty
man.
it is pretty close.
So anyway, that makes it now your call. So as we're in this month of October, what another creature feature or monster movie do we have going?
Yeah, so since we released Vampire's Kiss, we were thinking about prior having a sort of theme for Halloween, and well, we didn't do that because we screwed up our
What should we do?
scheduling.
Our theme is movies that are probably good to watch on Halloween.
Yeah, it's like so. Here, my pick. I was inspired by Mad Monster Party to have another ensemble monster film. I'd like to do the Monster Squad.
Oh, that'll be a good one.
Yes, it is one I've seen before, and you should watch it.
I have seen it, and it's very good.
But I was talking to the audience.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I
I
wasn't
was making everything about me again.
Yeah. No, the audience should watch it and tune in as we talk about it.
And then Bones, we talked about this a little bit, but this is thinking ahead a little bit. But come November, you know how I keep saying that we're going to do those requests that we're getting? Well, November is going to be all requests movies. So I've got a list of requests I've taken so far. So if you want to put any that are, to be in the running for November, go ahead and in the next couple episodes, let us know so we can add them to our list.
And time period does not matter. And preferably if it's not in English, at least it has subtitles,
Right. Now, if it only can be found on like some rare DVD that's, hidden away in a temple somewhere, we probably can't do it.
Yeah, it's probably not happening.
Well, anyway, thank you for listening. We're everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Odyssey, Castbox.
The works.
The works, right? So if you enjoyed this, leave a like or a review. If you got a movie you'd like to see, comment. And if we got something wrong, well, I'm sure it's Bones' fault, but you can take that up with me. You can leave me a
If we
comment.
got something wrong, hit the subscribe button.
If you liked it, hit the subscribe button. If you hated it, well, you should let us know more. Hit the subscribe button.
But yeah, thank you for listening.
And keep it cold.